Hello, everyone. This is Fanboy and Amateur Girls over there from somewhere near Hollywood. And today we're going to talk about one of the first, what some people have called the first modern escapist movie, or the first escapist movie of modern times, and that would be Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps. And I've watched it many times. Well, I would say 3 or 4 times over the years. Probably saw it on small little black and white TV years and years ago, probably in my 20s. And I was just, wow, what a cool movie. And of course, it's been an inspiration for not just the movie, but the original book, 39 Steps, was considered probably the first thriller ever written. The first thriller. And so most today's thrillers, and they called them shockers back in those days, which means that the sequences, each sequence ends with a kind of an edge of the seat thing, and you can't wait to get to the next sequence. And so John Buchan, the guy who wrote 39 Steps, was really the first one to start doing this, where you get a sequence. I can't wait. I got to find out what's going to happen next, and just keep, And Sherlock Holmes, it didn't really work that way, because Sherlock Holmes came before John Buchan, and his was more methodical, logical, thinking through the steps of the crime and trying to figure it out. But it wasn't like that sequential excitement there that you got with the 39 Steps, the book. And so anyway, it basically started a lot of things. I look at Richard Haney, the main character of 39 Steps, is the missing link between, and because people don't talk about it too much, between Sherlock Holmes and James Bond. And I think the reason for that, there was only 3 books that contained that character. There was this book, and then there was 2 sequels to it. And they're not very popular, not like Sherlock Holmes is and like James Bond is. And James Bond, there was many books and then many movies. And then with Sherlock Holmes, there was the same thing, many books and many movies. And this 39 Steps was kind of an aberrant, kind of out in left field. But Hitchcock liked the story because he did the first version of it, and it's been remade maybe 4 times since, and they've never been that good. His is the best still, even though it was made in 1935, black and white. Man, it is so old fashioned. When I first saw it, back in my 20s, I wasn't really struck by the old fashionedness of the 30s, because I think there was still a bit of old fashioned running around even in the 60s, when I saw it. That was only 30 years later, but now, wow, it looks it is way back in the day, because I just watched it the other night again. I haven't watched it in probably a few years, so but every time I watch it, I'm struck by something else. So many things going on in this movie, but I'm a cineaniste, or someone who's interested in the entire arc of cinema history, and how how certain films fit into that big, as a clog or a gear into that big machine of cinema history. But we're going to talk now to Amateur Girl, who is who is just a casual viewer, I guess you'd say, of movies, and see what her reaction, just as a casual viewer, is of the 39 Steps. And then I'll talk a little bit more about it.
As I'm sitting here listening to it, really, when I was watching, I really just wanted to hear the history behind it and how it connects to like James Bond or maybe like Mission Impossible. As a casual viewer, truly, I want to just sound smart and say that I loved it. Yeah, it is super old-fashioned, and I do like old-fashioned movies. And I thought it's fascinating to see the landscapes that they shot and how they did things and how they transitioned from scene to scene. To me, it was more like watching a play. And then the costume, the clothing of that time, and the way that they spoke was a little different. So I always think that that's really interesting to watch. But other than that, it's not something that I would probably go back and watch again in like 5 years.
Oh, yeah, I'd watch it again. I started watching it a little bit last night because I noticed it's also on my Criterion channel, which I did not know. I watched it on YouTube, but it turns out it's on the Criterion channel too, with the Hitchcock and Truffaut talking about it. Truffaut was a very famous French director who would like to interview other directors when he was a film critic, because he was a film critic before he became a movie director. And so he interviewed Hitchcock, and they have that interview with the 39 Steps movie on my Criterion channel. So I listened to that last night. It was only 20 minutes long. Didn't really learn a lot. Really, tell you the truth. It's funny though, for me, Hitchcock, I used to live in Los Gatos, California for many years. And Hitchcock's estate was right across literally right across the freeway from where I used to live.
Wow.
So he had a winery and everything there. Now this is years later after 39 Steps. He was still just a British director when he made this movie. The movie he made before that, The Man Who Knew Too Much, he says he still felt he was an amateur filmmaker at that time. And I think he pretty much said he felt amateurish making this movie too. Now I watched the opening sequences again. I'm still amazed about his use of angles and the way he blends all the, and you talked about it being more like a play. Well, before Hitchcock, movies were very static. They just set the camera, especially in sound film, because they had the problem with the camera. I mean, with the microphone and everything was an issue. Silent film, they could move. They got to the point where they were pretty fluid. You know, by the 20s, the films were fluid. They edited. The editing was fluid. Everything was fluid. Then the sound came in, and then they were hampered by this big old sound machine. They didn't know it, so it became very static again. Hitchcock somehow figured out how to break away from that and make things less static. So, if you watch the opening sequence, his use of angles, and then the whole, I don't know how many cuts were in that theater scene at the beginning. There's a lot. He did a lot of cuts. So I look at it from that standpoint as he was a pioneer in that kind of thing, and definitely a pioneer in the thriller. Now this one introduced three plot devices that you can find very notably in Mission Impossible, the new Mission Impossible. The first plot device is the Doomed Spy. Elsa in the Mission Impossible is the Doomed Spy, and they introduced her in the last movie, but now they, I don't want to spoiler alerts, but they finish her off and almost in exactly the same way they do in 39 Steps, which is so funny, right? With the knife. And in the book, it's a man, and he dies the same way, and even more like Elsa than the character in the Hitchcock movie. The second plot device is the reluctant companion, the person who doesn't want to come along for the ride, but stuck there anyway. So just like the thief in Mission Impossible, the Madeleine Carroll character in this movie is definitely reluctant, being dragged along in handcuffs with this guy, right? So that's the second, and you see that redone many times. I think they've redone it in James Bond movies. They've redone it many, but this was the first time it was done in the book, and then Hitchcock, like I said, he was the first one to really mine this material, and he reused it again and again in his movies. And then James Bond picked it up, and then it's been reused in thrillers over and over and over again. So those two big plot devices of the reluctant companion and the doomed spy. And then the third one, of course, is the MacGuffin, which is it's become very famous. The MacGuffin. You've heard of the MacGuffin before? It's been used over and over again as a device. The MacGuffin is and he used this. Hitchcock did not coin it. Some other guy coined the name MacGuffin, but he basically brought this up the first time in connection with the movies. That this is the device that is used, it's the thing that everybody's after, right? Like in Mission Impossible, the key is the MacGuffin. It's the thing that's everybody's after, but it's interchangeable. You could turn it into a book, you could turn it into like a person, and in 39 Steps is Mr. Memory and whatever he's got in his head, or the plans. They didn't know. One improvement, whatever it is. So the MacGuffin is the thing that everybody's chasing, right? So again, the same device they used in 39 Steps, they used in Mission Impossible 7. It's amazing after all these years, it's still an effective way of structuring a movie, right? That you got these guys are chasing the key, another group of guys are chasing them. In this case, they got two sets of people chasing Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is chasing the key. Everybody's chasing everybody else, right? And then 39 Steps is exactly the same. Now, the improvement that Hitchcock made over the book, which I thought was fascinating, and I never thought about it before, because I read the book, is that the book is Richard Handy, meets the spy dies, and then he goes off trying to find this shadowy organization. It's a MacGuffin. No one cares what it is. If you ask somebody after the movie what the heck they were going, they wouldn't be able to tell you. All they can remember is the girl, the handcuffs, and them being chased around. That's it. To the audience, it means nothing. That's why the MacGuffin is so interesting, because to the audience, it is a meaningless thing. But you have to put it in to keep the plot going, right? You have to have every thriller has to have a MacGuffin to keep the thing going, or it's like the gas for the engine, right? So Hitchcock, though, he read the book and he goes, it was written again by Charles Bennett, which was a writer that basically transitioned him into Hollywood. They were both English. This movie, 39 Steps, brought Hitchcock to Hollywood. This is the movie. And the British were trying to become international. See, the British film industry was nobody watched British movies. Nobody gave a shit. They didn't particularly care for them. So they got Robert Downey, who was a famous English actor who had been in Hollywood movies, and Madeline Carroll, who also had been in Hollywood movies. And they brought them back to England because they're both English. And they paired him with Hitchcock, and Hitchcock made this movie. And he became automatically noticeable too. And within like a year, he was in Hollywood working. So this is the movie that brought him to Hollywood, and also put British film on the map. So it's important in so many different ways. What was I trying? Oh yeah, I'm trying to get to the point what Hitchcock changed, which I thought was so funny, was that when Richard Hannity in the book goes off, he goes to that house, and out of all the houses in England, he goes into the house where the head spy is, where the head villain is. He just happens to go into the house. And like Hitchcock said when he read this, what the hell? How does that happen? So when he made the movie, he got the map, and he circled where the place is, so that gave him a reason to go there. For in the book, it was just so coincidental, it was almost to the absurd, right? So he basically fixed the book, which is funny. Right?